Good evening, everyone. Good evening, good evening. I'm just going to give it a couple of moments to allow other people to join the session. Please feel free to use the chat box. You're going to need it this evening. Good evening. Welcome to all the new joiners. I will start in a couple of minutes. I'm just waiting for other people to join, but please feel free to use the chat box today. I'm really looking forward to answering your questions, to telling you all about the private school, grammar school process. And I hope you find this session useful. Okay. Good evening. Good evening to all the new joiners. Okay. I'll get started in a minute, just allow a couple more people to join the session. Again, like I've said, if you've just joined, please feel free to use the chat box. I will be answering as many questions as I physically can in the time. There's no such thing as a silly question. We're all here to learn. So, yeah. Okay, one more minute and then I'll get started. Okay, right. So good evening. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Onyinye Udokporo and I'm the CEO and founder of Enrich Learning. Enrich Learning is an online education platform and tuition center, and I've been doing this for about 10 years, just over 10 years. I myself went to a private school on a scholarship, and so not only do I prepare children for the process, but I went through the process myself, albeit, gosh, I think about 12 years ago now. It is a bit different to when I did it, but there are so many similarities. And if anything, I would say it's become more competitive. So I hope that today's session is useful and I hope that you learn something and you take something away. I think the first thing I want to make very clear to everyone is, as you can see, there are 3 entry points. So there is a common myth that the 11 plus is only for 11 plus, because it's often referred to as the 11 plus, which is the general term that we use for the entry process for private and grammar schools. However, we've got 11 plus, we've got 13 plus, and we've got 16 plus. And the reason why I'm mentioning this now is, if your child doesn't make it for the 11 plus, then you can try again at the 13 plus. And if they don't make it at the 13 plus point, then you can try again at the 16 plus point. Each of the entry points are slightly different and in some ways are more accessible than others. So hopefully this will allow you to plan for the future, whether you're looking for your child to do this process now or in a couple of years' time. So, what am I covering today? So I'll give you a little bit of an itinerary. So I'm starting off with talking about the 11 plus. That is the most popular entry point. It is the most competitive entry point. And my recommendation is to start at that point, because even if if your child doesn't gain admission at the 11 plus stage, the preparation and the groundwork that you put in at that level will help you to will help your child to access the 13 plus and the 16 plus. Then I'm going to go into what are private schools and what are grammar schools and make clear the difference. They are not the same. They are very, very different, and they suit different children in different families. So hopefully that will be useful for you. I'll then talk about the examination process, what you need to do. I'll talk about how we at Enrich Learning can support you and what we offer, and also why I'm doing this webinar today. There's been a lot of questions about neurodiversity. As somebody who is dyslexic herself, I think it's really important that I address this point. So just if your child has dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, ADHD, there's a whole host of different challenges. They can definitely be overcome, and this process is for you as well. I'll talk about the exam. I'll give you some tips on different resources that you can buy, and then I'll do a Q&A session, and I'll take as many questions as I can physically take in the time. So what is the 11 plus? So the 11 plus is a selective entrance exam for secondary school. It is used by both state-funded grammar schools, and it's used by many private schools to identify the most academically able children. So I have to stress that this process is academic. It is not creative. It is not recreational. There are creative scholarships for those who are good at art. There are music scholarships. There are drama scholarships, but it is not a creative process. Your child's academic ability is inevitable. It's inevitably what will get your child there. So the focus has to be on the books from year 4. I start my students on year 4. If you feel that your child is a bit of a slower learner, then I would actually recommend from year 3. The exam, so the 11 plus exam, is a bit deceiving that they call it 11 plus, because your child will sit that exam when they are 10, and it's taken towards the end of year 5 or at the beginning of year 6. In very extenuating circumstances, it may be moved to the middle of year 6. So, for example, due to COVID, a lot of the 11 plus exams this year are being sat in January, when hopefully we'll be able to have more social or reduce social distancing, and things will be back to the new normal. However, we don't know. You know, the exams may be pushed forward again. So that's something for you to bear in mind. Then we have the 13 plus. The 13 plus exam is taken when your child is in year 8. Again, a very deceiving term, because your child will sit that exam when they are 12, not when they are 13. I often encourage parents who start the 11 plus process later than I would like, or later than I recommend, to continue with the preparation and allow their child to sit the 13 plus exam. The 13 plus exam is an opportunity for those that are slower learners to still access private school and grammar school, but in some cases it is less competitive. Obviously, there are fewer places in many schools at 13 plus, but there is less pressure. Your child is less likely to walk into a room filled with 3,000 other kids, which when you're doing the 11 plus, if you're going for the extremely competitive schools, your child will really be competing against 3,000, 4,000 other children for 192 places in many cases. So the 13 plus is an opportunity for your child to go through the 11 plus process when they're more likely to be a bit more mature, more likely to be able to handle the pressure. And if they didn't get the 11 plus exam, you know, the first time around, this is an opportunity to do it the second time around. Again, it is a very academic process. The focus is academic. Like I said, there are scholarships and bursaries. And I will touch on that later. Of course, if you've got loads of questions, feel free to ask. But the focus is academic, and you still have to do the non-verbal and verbal reasoning as alongside maths and English. And I will talk a bit more about those kind of cognitive subjects a bit later on, because I know that for some parents, they're like, what's non-verbal, what's verbal? So hopefully that will become clear. 16 plus. 16 plus is very different to the 11 plus and the 13 plus. So the 16 plus exams are set by independent schools and some grammar schools, not all, some grammar schools, to allow them, so that's the schools, to select pupils for intake into year 12. Your child needs to have strong predicted grades to be given a conditional offer. All offers at 16 plus level are conditional unless your child has really blown the school away. So that means your child will be given a place based on their predicted grades. And in some cases, they would have to sit an exam as well, which has verbal and non-verbal, or what we call a CAT test, a cognitive ability test. And the 16 plus is academic. It is for kids who want to take A levels. It is not, if your child is more technical or hands-on, I don't recommend going through the 16 plus process. It is very stressful because your child will do it alongside preparing for their GCSE exams. If you would like your child to go to a grammar school or a private school for the sixth form, you need to start the process from the end of year 9. That gives them the summer holidays, all of year 10 to prepare, so that when we get into year 11, the focus can be on the GCSEs, because that's the most important thing. GCSEs is what they will carry through for the rest of their lives. It is also the entry requirement for many schools to have grades 6, 7, 8. And 6 is them being kind, predominantly 7, 8, 9. So that's 7, if those numbers mean nothing to you, a 7 is an A, an 8 is an A star, a 9 is a double A star. So those are the kind of grades they'd be looking for grammar school entry and for private school entry. Private schools are also known as independent schools. They mean the exact same thing. You may also hear people refer to it as public school. It's all just private school. Now, let's talk about the difference between private school and grammar school. So in the UK, independent schools, also known as private schools, are fee charging schools. So you pay fees to go to the school. Now, I'm not going to lie, the fees can be extremely high. There are some schools that cost £40,000 a year, £30,000 a year, £35,000 a year. Average cost of a private school, especially if it's got a boarding facility, in this day and age, you're looking at £30,000 a year. Now, please don't leave the webinar, because it doesn't mean that you have to have £30,000 spare. Like I said, there are bursary options. So there are some schools that will offer your child a place on a means tested basis. So they'll look at your assets, they'll look at your mortgage or your rent, they will look at whether you can afford for your child to be in a private environment. And if they pass the exam, they will be given a bursary, which is essentially a grant that you don't have to pay back. They deduct that from the fees, and they will give you, after making sure you can live, an amount of money to pay for fees that would be affordable for your specific case. Not a lot of private schools have this option, but there's a school on here, Christ's Hospital. That's where I went to school. Gosh, I left 5 years ago now. But that's a school that is famously known for having a lot of bursary places, a lot of means tested places that are more affordable, but still give you excellent first class education. So that is an example of a school where you would have that option. A school like Eton College, so it's a boys only school. They don't have that many means tested places. They do have tech places, where you wouldn't have to pay any fees, but it's extremely competitive. And we're talking about 1 in every year group. So you do have to do a little bit of research. you do have to, understand the type of school that you want your child to go to, and you need to also make sure that you've got the financial ability to cover the costs. It's very rare that somebody would go to a private school and pay no fees. So even if it's means tested, even if you have a bursary, you would have to contribute something. And in many cases, even when you have a scholarship, you would have to contribute something. And I'll talk a little bit now about the bursary versus the scholarship. So the bursary, like I said, is means tested. You will be required to send in a substantial amount of information about your financial situation, from your income to your savings to your rent to your mortgage, etc. And they have an accounts team who would work out what you can and cannot afford. When it comes to a scholarship, however, that has got nothing to do with how much you earn, but it's more to do with your child's ability, your child's excellence, and their performance. So your child might get a scholarship because they are very academically bright. Your child might get a scholarship because they are an excellent sportsman. They might get a scholarship because they're brilliant at a musical instrument. So, and when I say brilliant at a musical instrument, I'm talking about grade 6 and above. So you're not going to get a scholarship if your child is, grade 1 or grade 2. And that's why it's important to invest in those activities when your child is young, if you can afford it. Your child might get a scholarship because they're fantastic at art, so they're very good at drawing. Those things are what will get your child a scholarship. But the catch is, for many places, a scholarship means 20% off the full fee for the year. So if the full fee for the year is 40 grand, you're getting 8 grand off. That means you're paying £32,000 yourself for the year. If your child's performance drops, in many schools, the scholarship will be taken away and you will be required to pay the entire fee. So again, scholarships are very competitive. I don't sugarcoat things. They do put the child under pressure. They put the parent under pressure. You have to maintain that level of excellence throughout your time at the school. So they're not for everyone, right? So that's something to bear in mind. And you have to assess, again, due to your situation, what option is better for you. Obviously, the bursary is better for many people than the scholarship. However, if you are in a well-paying job, so in a job that earns you over 50, 60,000 pounds a year, you're probably not going to get a bursary, is the honest truth, and you'll have to go down the scholarship route. Grammar schools. Now, grammar schools are state schools that select their pupils by means of an examination, and they start taking children in from the age of 11, doing the 11 plus test. In England, we only have 163 grammar schools, so it is extremely competitive. Many grammar schools do not have a 13 plus entry point, but they do have a 16 plus entry point. So grammar schools are extra competitive because you don't have the 13 plus point, so you have to do the 11 plus, and at 16 plus, the kids that are going there are straight A and A-star students at GCSE level. It is something that you have to prepare your child from an early age, from a very early age. And you've got to also think about whether your child can withstand the pressure within a grammar school. Everybody in a grammar school is bright. They all had to sit an exam. And not to say that your child isn't bright, but if you know that your child really had to struggle to pass that exam, they will probably have to struggle to get through everything else whilst they're at the school. That is not always healthy. So you've got to think about whether that would suit your child and suit you, whether your child is the type of person that can always be competitive, always be on the ball. Again, it's not for everyone, so you do have to think about it. The pro to grammar schools is that you get not always, but many a time, you get a private school like education for free. That's why grammar schools were created. They were created quite a while ago to level the playing field. So, for example, a very common private school activity is debating. Many state schools don't do it, but many grammar schools will. So it's a private school activity that your child would find in a grammar school that you don't have to pay for, that will open doors for them and open opportunities. So that's something for you to think about. So that's the big difference. Please note that, there are 163 grammar schools. They're not in every single area. It is also to do with your postcode, and the areas in which grammar schools exist, the properties in that area tend to be quite expensive. So there are so many different factors that affect accessibility to grammar schools. That's something you've got to remember. So the 11 plus and 13 plus process. So there are 5 very simple steps. I know that there are some tutors who like to overcomplicate it. I've broken it down to 5 very easy steps. It really is as simple as what you're seeing on this video today. The first is find the schools that you would like your child to attend. Do your research. If we weren't in COVID times, I would say go to open days. But now there are some fantastic virtual open days that you can attend. And I know that in the new year, many schools are going back to having open days. I would recommend that you actually go to the school. Do not apply to schools that you've not visited. You need to make sure that the atmosphere, the vibe, the environment, the teaching staff, and the other pupils work well for your child and your child's personality. The second thing is, please submit your application form and do so on time. For the private schools, it is very likely that you will have to pay for the form. And those forms can be £100 plus. So it is an investment. The process is an investment. Don't start it if you won't, part ways with your cash, essentially, because it's not cheap, but it pays off if you persevere. Then get the right resources, so the books, the past papers, and start working with them at home, working with your children at home. A state primary school will not prepare your child for the 11 plus or the 13 plus or the 16 plus. I'm going to say that again so that it's very clear. A state primary or secondary school will not prepare your child for this process. So if your child is struggling, and that brings me on to step number 4, then you have got to get your child tuition. And again, that is an investment that you have got to make. A lot of parents think they can teach their children the stuff for the 11 plus, the 13 plus, the 16 plus. And unless you are A, a tutor, or B, a teacher, you will not be able to prepare your child for this. That's the honest, on your own. At some stage, you'll need some intervention, even if it is just at the end, just to get that second opinion and some support. And then the 5th and final thing is to have a structured study routine. And that means starting this process early. So if you're going for the 11 plus, if your child is a slower learner, you start in year 3. If your child is a faster learner, you start in year 4. And also if you're paying for tuition, depending on when you can afford it as well. If you are going for the 13 plus, many a time those going for the 13 plus are the kids who didn't make it the first time around for the 11 plus. So they will have had tuition year 4, year 5, year 6, year 7, year 8. That's 5 years. You cannot start the 13 plus right at the beginning of year 8. That's when your child has to sit the exam. So even if you don't have that 5 years or that 4-year tuition, so let's say your child now is in year 6, start the prep now, or start the prep right at the beginning of year 7 to give them 12 to 18 months to get ready for the exam. And that way there are no nasty surprises or shocks. Having a structured study routine means putting in extra hours. So less PlayStation, less Xbox, less mobile phone, less YouTube, less internet, unless it's for study. You will have to have an extra 2 hours every day, an extra hour every day put in to make your child make sure that they pass this exam. There are people who do loads and loads of hours for the prep. Again, you've got to do what's right for your family and for your child, but it is not a process that you can start at the drop of a hat. It's got to be a routine. You've got to start with your child from very early on. And even though I say the tuition should start from year 4 or earliest year 3, start working with your child more from a younger age. Read with them, watch educational videos with them, listen to podcasts with them, listen to the radio with them. It might sound odd, but watch the news with them. All of these things do help to prepare your child for this process. Okay, so here is what Enriched Learning has to offer. So we offer, if your child is going for the 11 plus, we offer tuition 4 times a week. So we do English, maths, verbal reasoning, non-verbal reasoning with the child. And each class is £7.50, so it's £30 for the week. It is one of the most affordable rates in the country. Our competitors do charge up to £92 an hour, and we also get the results. So your child is still getting the excellent tuition from myself and my incredible team, who are all at Russell Group universities. Many of them went through the process themselves, so they get it, they understand it, and we're happy to work with you. If your child is in year 7 and 8, we cover English and maths, and then there are additional classes closer to the time of the 11 plus or the 13 plus for your child at that point, and the classes are £13 each. Same for year 9 and 10, and with year 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, you get English, maths, all the sciences, so that's biology, chemistry, and physics, for £40 a week. If you're in year 11, then it's £45 a week. And if you visit our website, we are taking kids for the new year. So please do feel free to register. On this slide here is our mobile number, so you can send us a message on WhatsApp. We are more than happy to take you on. And I'm really keen on providing support for parents, because throughout this process, you will feel like you're taking the exam as well, and you've got to get ready for that. And so for that reason, starting this month, and that's what this webinar is all about. This is the launch of our Excellence in Education community for parents. So it's a subscription-based community, and for £8.99 a month, you will get an exclusively bi-monthly newsletter with a summary of the education in the news and advice. So for example, those of you who have children in year 11, it was announced that GCSE examinations in England will take place. So if you were in England, your child will have to sit their GCSE, even though we are in a pandemic. And so in our newsletter, we explain what that means. We break down exactly what's going to happen and what advice we can give you to support your child. We will have monthly expert-led webinars like this. So this webinar is free because it's the launch webinar, but thereafter, these webinars will only be accessible to the parents who are part of the Excellence community. You will get access to discounted tuition and activities, and you'll get access to our online Slack communities. That's a messaging community with myself and other experts, and where you can get advice and drop your problems, and we can put in solutions. So it's a worthy investment for yourself as a parent if you're looking to help you and your child grow. The link is to subscribe is pinned at the top. I really hope that you join us. I'm really looking forward to it. You can think of it as the new Mumsnet, but we bring solutions to your problems, real advice from real experts. And I just finished a postgraduate degree in education policy and sociology. So I'd like to think that I'm an expert myself, if you get what I mean. So I hope to see you join. And if you have any questions about it, then you can do so. You can ask in the Q&A. So back to the 11 plus, 13 plus, 16 plus topic. Neurodiversity. This was a very, very popular question that I wanted to address because I'm dyslexic myself. So I know what it's like to be dealing with this issue. Conditions like dyslexia, dyscalculia, ADHD, and dyspraxia are neurodiverse issues, that neurodiverse conditions, and your child can go through this process at every level. They are entitled to extra time, rest breaks. If your child has issues with coordination, a scribe, and colored paper. If your child uses colored paper. So I use bright yellow colored paper. That helps me read better. It helps me read quicker. That's also why the slides are yellow. And so your child you will have access to those things, provided you have enough evidence. Now, if you join the Excellence community, there are experts who are going to be coaching parents about neurodiversity, how to spot the signs, how to get help at an affordable rate, because it's very expensive, but you will need a report from either an occupational therapist or an educational psychologist. So you cannot just say to the school, I think my child is dyslexic, give them extra time. There has to be evidence in order to support your case, and they are very much entitled to this. So extra time can be as much as an extra 50%. So if everybody else sits the exam for an hour, your child will sit the exam for an hour and a half if they have one of these conditions and they are eligible for that much extra time. Now, let's talk about the exam. So I'll start off with the 11 plus and 13 plus because the exam is fairly similar. So there are two main exam boards. If you're taking down notes, I suggest you write this down. The two main exam boards are CEM brackets Durham University and GL assessment. Now, being aware of these exam boards doesn't mean that you can go and buy the papers and that your child will be able to have more knowledge than anybody else, but it does mean that you will be able to buy the right resources that will enable your child to not walk into the exam and think, oh my goodness, what are these questions? I've never seen this before. So it gives your child a sense of familiarity, which is really important. Some schools, mostly the private schools, and some of the grammar schools are now moving to this system of using CAT tests. The annoying thing about the CAT test is that there is supposedly no preparation required. Let me tell you now, there is no 11 plus or 13 plus or 16 plus exam that requires no preparation. They all require preparation, so don't be deceived by that. The schools don't like parents paying for tuition and preparing their children. But the honest truth is that everyone is doing it. So if your child doesn't do it, they just won't pass. Because if everybody else has had 2 years of tuition, 3 years of tuition, they're obviously going to do better in the exam. The CATS tests, although there is no specific textbook or resource, there are ways to train your child that tutors are aware of, and that will help your child be able to access those exams and pass them. Some of the exams are taken on a computer. And the reason why I make this very clear to parents is your child's digital literacy is also extremely important. That means your child needs to be able to use a computer. And just because your child plays games on the computer doesn't mean that they're able to use it for educational purposes. Get used to software that's used for testing. Get used to engaging with academic material online. So if your child does tuition with us at Enrich Learning, all our tuition is online, for example, so you don't have to leave your house. It's very convenient. And your child builds their digital literacy as well. So they'll know what Google Documents are. They'll know how to sign on to an online test. They'll know how to get themselves logged on. They'll know what passwords are. They won't have any issues with that stuff. And that stuff does hold children back. So children can fail, not because they don't know what to do, but because they are not digitally literate. So that's something for you to bear in mind with the 11 plus and the 13 plus. Now, the 16 plus is a little bit more complicated. There are two things you've got to be very aware of, or three things you've got to be very aware of. The first is the famous December or January mock exams. Those mock exams are pivotal, and they will actually be the decider as to whether you can go for that 11 plus exam or whether you cannot. So the 16 plus, I don't know why I said 11 plus. So those exams, the mock exams that are either in December or January, depending on your child's school, will be what decides whether they can apply or not, whether it's worth your time. Those exams are what the teachers will base your child's predicted grades on. And they are what your child's school will send to the potential private school or grammar school as evidence of your child's capability. So often what happens with many young people in all my years of teaching is they don't take those exams very seriously. They think it's a bit of a joke. And I have had kids who get maybe a grade 4, so that's a low C in those mock exams, but then get an 8 by the time they have their real exams. If your child is going for a grammar or a private school, that is not going to work out very well, and it's going to put them under a lot of pressure. They've got to do well from the get-go. You want your child to be predicted 7, 8, 9, especially in the subjects they wish to take for A-level. Grammar schools and private schools are not massive fans of the BTEC. So if you know your child has lower attainment, and there is nothing wrong with that at all, it's just maybe that their skill set isn't in academia, that's fine, but this process will not be for them. And even if they do get through the front door to the school, they won't enjoy it because those schools will force them to philosophy, history, geography, design and technology, art, but you're not going to get, for example, in business studies or media, you're not going to get that. So you need to be very aware of that from the beginning. Some schools will also do CAT tests. So you send your predicted grades, you then sit a CAT test, usually online, and then you'll be called in for an interview. The sixth form places are competitive. So like I said earlier, if you're looking at the 16 plus, start preparing your child from the end of year 9, have a small selection of schools, be aware of their application process and start the prep. In your child's spare time, they need to be getting ready for this because it is a process. So that's the 16 plus. Now on to the $1 million question. What resources do you need? Well, get your phones out, take pictures of the screen or write it down. These are just some of the books. If you have tuition with Enrich Learning, you will have done every single one of these textbooks by the time you get to the exam, if you start on time. So don't come to me when your child is like end of year 5. If they start at the beginning of year 4, by the time they get to the stage where they sit the exam, which is end of year 5, early year 6, this is for the 11 plus, they will have done every single one of these books, probably twice over. So that familiarity, that repetitiveness will get them there. And that's why we have had the success rates that we've had. You know, in the last year, we've had 11 of our kids either went to private or grammar school with bursaries and scholarships. 6 out of 6 the year before that, 9 out of 9 the year before that. That's just out of the kids that where the parents decided to push their kids forward for this process. If you are applying for the 13 plus, this might sound odd, but this is the same resources your child will use. It is not about ability when it comes to the 11 plus and the 13 plus. It is more about your child's technique. And so these books, I'm not saying if you do these books, you'll pass the exam. Like I said, you need to have expert advice, a professional opinion, if you can afford it, of course. What it will do for you, however, is it will give your child the opportunity to be familiar and understand the type of questions that they will be asked, which is really important. Brands you can trust, because there are loads and loads of kind of like fake 11 plus materials out there. So you do have to be careful. The ones that I trust: CGP, First Past the Post, Let's, GL Assessment. You can get them on Amazon. It's the most affordable place to get them. If you go to WH Smith or Waterstones, you'll spend double the price. So I hope that this is useful information. I wouldn't recommend that you just go out and buy all of them. There is a technique. And again, if you have a tutor, they will tell you which books you need to buy at what points and how to use them. So getting the books is not just enough, but it's a starting point. And if you can't afford tuition, it is possible to pass the exam just using the books, but you know, it always helps to get that professional advice. Okay, so now on to the part that everyone is dying for. I am going to allocate the next 15 to 20 minutes to questions and answers. Please ask all of your questions in the chat box. I will answer as many of them as I physically can. Please feel free. There's no such thing as a silly question. So yeah, feel free to ask as many questions as you like. So we've got one higher. When you mean sit exams in year 7 and 8, does that mean they will potentially leave a state school if they get a place at a grammar school? Yes, that is exactly what it means. That's a brilliant question. Thank you. So if your child sits the 13 plus exam, your child will leave that state school at the end of year 8 and go to the private school at the beginning of year 9. I have to stress that very, very few grammar schools will have places for the 13 plus. So very, very few grammar schools will have places for the 13 plus. That is something that you have got to bear in mind. So don't set your heart on a grammar school at the 13 plus stage. If you are going for a grammar school, you need to go for it at 11 plus. If it doesn't work at 11 plus, then you go for it at 16 plus. But I wouldn't be giving you completely transparent information if I said you could get a place at 13 plus. It does happen, but it's very rare. Are there any other questions? Please don't be shy. My son is in year 10. How can I prepare him for his GCSEs? Okay, so first point of call, great question. Thank you so much. First point of call for prep for GCSEs is get his school report and have a look at where he is. Many a time we have parents who are wishing to help their kids for their GCSEs, but they don't actually know the starting point. If your child is in year 10 and they are getting grade 4 and 5, I'll be honest, that's not good enough. Grade 4 is a low C, grade 5 is a high C. Anything below that, get support immediately. Once you know what your child's problem areas are at GCSE level, I highly recommend that you get a tutor or you speak directly to his school teachers and see whether there are any extra provisions. It's often known as intervention in state schools that they can offer. It's also a wise decision to make sure that your child is cutting back on social media time and cutting back on telly time and games time, PlayStations and all of that at year 10, because they need to revise. And he will have been grossly affected by COVID-19. He will be behind in the content. And so far, we've not been given an indication as to whether there'll be any amendments for those in year 10 for their GCSEs in year 11. So to summarize, 1, find out what the problem areas are, get his school report or speak to every single teacher and find out where he's at now. Isolate the problem subjects. The subjects that are especially important are English and maths, and of course, science. If you don't have English and maths, you will be forced to reset it until you are 19 years old, and that can lead to many problems. And once you've done that, if you can't support him yourself or get him textbooks or the school can't support him, then get him a tutor. I hope that helps. With our children currently attending tuition with Enriched Learning right now, can they sit the 16 plus exams? Of course they can. So they can sit the 16 plus exams. Please give me an indication if that's what you want to do, and then I can speak to you privately on what the process would be for that and how you need to approach it. To apply for, this is a really good question. To apply for a bursary, if the total household income is over £50,000, would they still be considered? That's a really good question. I am not the bursar, so that the person who is in charge of bursaries in a private school is known as the bursar. I am not a bursar for a school, and the honest truth is that it's very much dependent on the school and dependent on your circumstance. So if your total household income is over £50,000, but your expenditure is £45,000 and you're only left with £5,000 to spare extra, then it is likely that you could be given a bursary that would help you pay for your child's school fees. I always say to parents that you never know what can happen, that you should apply for a bursary anyway, because each school will have their own policies. Of course, lower household incomes will be, will get picked first, but that doesn't cut you out entirely. So I hope that answers your question. They will still be considered. They won't turn you away as long as you provide all of the paperwork. You never know what can happen. Another great question, what subjects are taken in 16 plus, considering children are doing different subjects for GCSE? So just to clarify with the 16 plus, all of your child's what's the word now? GCSE subjects will be considered. They place more emphasis or more weight on the subjects that your child has made an explicit interest in for A-level. So for example, if somebody takes A-level English, history, religious studies, and psychology, at GCSE level, they will be looking at grades 7, 8, and 9. So that's A star, AA star in GCSE English, GCSE history, GCSE religious studies, and GCSE biology for the psychology side of things. They will also then be, in some schools, will then be asked to sit a CATS test that has the non-verbal and verbal reasoning that you would have to prepare your child for privately, because the state school will not provide that. And then on top of that, in many schools, they will be asked to attend an interview. So it's quite an arduous process, which is why I say start at the end of year 10 at the very latest. So start at the end of year 9 at the very latest beginning of year 10. However, if your child is halfway through year 10, it's not late. They'll just have to put in a little bit of extra work to get them to where they want to be. Okay, another great question. At what point in primary school, year 6, do we apply for grammar schools? And is it possible to apply for state schools as well? Yes, so the grammar school application process is slightly different, and I won't go into it too much because that's for the next webinar for those who are part of the excellence community. But long story short is you put your child's grammar school application on your local authority application form. That's where you'll put the choice. You also have to apply directly to that grammar school. So if your child is in year 5, keep checking the website because they all have varying deadlines for the application. If you don't apply directly to the school and you only apply via your local authority, your child will not get a place. So you apply for the grammar school and you apply for the state schools, but as you may or may not know, this, you have to rank your schools in terms of choice. You would place the grammar school as your number 1 choice and also be preparing your child privately as well. I hope that makes sense. It's a bit more of a complicated process, the grammar schools. And you need to make sure that your borough has grammar schools as well. Like I said, we only have 163 in England and not every single borough has one. Some boroughs have more. So Kent is famously known for having more. You start applying for 16 plus exams towards the end of year 10. So get a list of the name of the school that you want your child to go to. Once you get that list, submit private application forms. Some of them will require you to pay a fee. That fee can be £100, can be £50, can be £10, depending on the school's policy. But you need to make sure that you have applied by the end of year 10. So we're looking at June, July 2021, if your child is in year 10 now. Are there any other questions? Please feel free. Like, there is no such thing as a stupid question. If you want me to clarify something, or if you're confused about something, if you have a general question about tuition. Are there any other questions at all? Anything you want me to repeat? Anything at all? Okay. Well, if there are no other questions, then that will... I'll just give you all a moment to ask some more. Do you only do online tuition? Yes, at the moment, especially due to the pandemic, I not Enriched Learning won't be doing face-to-face tuition for a while simply because it's not safe to do so. However, when things are safer, again, we go back to whatever normal looks like. For my GCSE students, I do like to see them face to face because we all know what teenagers can be like. Sometimes they need me to scream at them in real life. And if your child is doing the 11 plus, 13 plus, or 16 plus, I host face-to-face sessions as well. So it's predominantly online. There are a few face-to-face options. Yes, hope that answers your question. Okay, what stage is best to start preparing your children for private school? The honest truth is, if you've got little kids, start from year 4. If they're a slower learner, then please start from year 3. Give them enough time and make the process enjoyable. So I really enjoyed the 11 plus process. My mum made it really, really fun. My dad made it really, really fun. Um, thoroughly enjoyed it. Um, I did, and alongside the studying side, I think it's really important I touch on this. Actually, it's a really good question. When you're preparing your child for a private school application, you also need to look at the extracurricular activities. Your child needs to play a sport. Your child needs to play a musical instrument. Your child needs to do an activity like drama or debating, and needs to do it at a high level. What I often find is that parents will try and push their kids into the activities, when they're like in year 5. It is too late at that point. I started doing ballet, tap, and gymnastics from the age of 3 or even 2.5. And I carried it right through until I was 11. So you can see that if I go to an exam, I've been in the game for 10 years. Of course, I'm going to pass, as opposed to parents who start when the child is, 9. It's far too late. I played the piano. I started that from when I was 7. That's when my fingers was long enough. So, I did debating. I started that from the age of 7 as well. And I did it right up until I was 18. So my point here is start early, and the preparation for private school isn't just about the study. So for the extracurriculars, start as young as you can, and if you can afford it, then that's great. For the academic side of stuff, get serious from year 3. If your child is a little bit slower, if your child is on the ball and can do it, then start from year 4. Do you apply to a private school directly? Absolutely. Yes, you apply to the private school directly. Like I said, each private school has their own application form. Some application forms are £100, £120. Some are even £200 now. It is an expensive process. Very few forms are free. Of course, if you've got evidence of an extenuating circumstance, some schools may make an allowance, but you apply directly to the school, the private school, and there is a registrar fee. How do you get them ready for the university? Okay, that's a really good question. Slightly unrelated, but I'll talk about it very briefly. Preparing your child for university is, I think, a holistic thing from an academic point of view. It is making sure that they are coping well with their A levels or BTEC, so that completing coursework, they're finishing homework, they are enjoying the process, they are on the ball. That is something that you can do to prepare them for university. The other thing is visit different universities. In this country, we have different types of universities. We have city universities, we have campus universities. So I did both of my degrees at King's College London. It is not a traditional campus style university. It's very much a city university in the middle of London. It suited my style personally, but I had been in boarding school for 7 years. So I didn't need that campus environment anymore. If your child is used to being at home with you, or with parents or carers or guardians, then you may think twice about that, and you may go for more of a campus style university where everybody lives on campus, like Warwick, for example, that type of style. Do you do tailored tutoring? Yes. So I personally do not do one-to-one sessions. So please don't ask me, because I'm just too busy now. However, my tutors do one-to-one sessions. The truth is, with one-to-one tuition, is it's extremely expensive for what it is. And unless your child is very much behind or very much struggling, it is better to put them in a group setting. The reason why I say this, I've done extensive research on it. I wrote a paper on it. I've done it for 10 years. Is this: the 11 plus process, if the tuition is for the 11 plus or the 13 plus or even the 16 plus, is competitive. Your GCSEs are competitive. Your A levels are competitive. When you isolate a child in a one-to-one session, you're not helping them. That's not competitive. There is a very relaxed nature about one-to-one. If you have a child that needs to go at their own pace or has a challenge that needs to be well managed, it's a totally different conversation. But if your child can cope in a group session, put them in a group session. I have had kids come into group sessions being at the bottom of the class and have risen to the top in 10 weeks because they see that everybody else around them is doing the exact same thing. I have had parents say to me, oh, my child moans less about having to do homework because they're in a group session, because all the other 15 or 20 kids also have to do this homework. And so what you find is your child rises to the challenge many a time. This doesn't always happen. And where a child doesn't suit the group setting, I personally take them out and put them in a one-to-one situation. So if I feel that a child is not coping, I take them out and I put them in a one-to-one situation. Are my all sessions one-to-one? If not, what is the maximum number of pupils you have per session? The maximum number of pupils that we can have in a session is 25, although I tend not to let that happen. So we're actually expanding in the new year for our Key Stage 2 class, which is our most popular one, given that each class is £7.50. I am separating into, I don't want to say lower ability, but the slightly younger ones, the ones who are a little bit slower, the ones who need a bit of extra time, and those who are at the top and need to be pushed. And so when you separate at that level, you tend to have between 15 and 20 in each class. Nearer to the exams, it's even smaller groups. And if I feel that that child needs a one-to-one, then I'll make sure that they have that for a set period of time. Will Enriched Learning give our children exams in preparation for their GCSEs and 16 plus exams? That's one question. And then another one is, how many times does Enriched Learning examine the children prior to their main exams in school? Okay, those are loads of questions. I'll try and tackle them. I'll start back to front, actually. So in terms of how many times does Enriched Learning examine the children prior to their main exams in school? This term, all the kids have an exam next week, for example, all the classes. And then there'll be a parents' evening with parents to kind of let you know where your child has been throughout the classes. So even though it's group tuition, your child is looked at on an individual basis. In terms of 11 plus, 13 plus, 16 plus exams, we run up to 10 mock exams beforehand. So those who are my parents who have their kids in the process now know how many mock exams their child will be required to take. They are sent the timetable well in advance. The kids who are doing the 11 plus, 13 plus, 16 plus have already had 3 mock exams already. So the whole mock exam thing, we know when to do it. We don't over examine. That doesn't achieve anything, and it puts the child off and puts them under too much pressure. But they do have exams. I can't stress enough, the 16 plus exams, it's more to do with your child's mocks, right? It's more to do with your child's mock grades and predicted grades. So there should be more focus on that than anything else. The other examinations, the verbal, the non-verbal, they're supplementary, as well as the interview. Where am I located? I'm in North London, but again, the tuition is online, so my location doesn't really matter anymore. There has been a significant reduction in face-to-face tuition. That's because of COVID, and also because the online tuition is the future. Well, it's not just the future, it's the present. Online learning is what we have to be focusing on now. So yeah, I hope that helps. And then you did mention that 13 plus uses the same book as 11 plus. So then what is the expectation in the exam? That's a really good question. The 13 plus expectation, it's about the technique. So those numbers on the book are a marketing ploy. The questions in there, if you give a child who has not done any 11 plus preparation whatsoever in year 9, for example, an 11 plus book, they won't be able to answer the questions because they will have never seen those type of questions before. So the book is there not so much for ability, for technique. The way these exams work is that no matter what the question is, if you know the technique, you'll be able to answer it. So at Enriched Learning, we use those books as a tool to help parents have extra questions that their child can practice and help them more familiar with. Okay, so for example, I also work at a Big 4 firm, and my entrance exam for that firm required me to do the same types of questions that you do at 11 plus. I did not revisit 11 plus. I mean, I teach it, so it helps, but there is no such thing as adult verbal and non-verbal. And even when they have the questions there aren't loads to work with. But that same technique that I was taught when I was 10, 11 is what I applied. And well, I got the job, so I passed the exam. So that's what you have to bear in mind. It is about the technique, not so much the age on the front of the book. That's something for you to be aware of. Okay, I think I've got my last question, which is my son is 6 years old now and in year 2. Is it an ideal time to start preparing him for the 11 plus, i.e. tutoring? 6 years old is a little young for the 11 plus preparation. I would say wait until he's at least 7. But it's not too early to have tuition if your child is 6. So the truth is that I was tutored from the age of 3. I had tuition from the age of 3 right throughout school. So that's a huge investment that my parents made, and there are 4 of us. So they all we all had that kind of tuition. That is because, being completely honest and transparent with you, not all schools are performing at a satisfactory standard. So your child may not be getting taught the content that will make the 11 plus accessible to them. That's something you've got to bear in mind. So it's early for 11 plus, but if you notice that your child just needs a little bit of extra help, there is nothing wrong with going for the for a little bit of tuition for him to help him get there. But other things you can do is reading with him is really important. Read extensively, watch educational things. So don't just watch cartoons, they don't help. Engage with him, speak to him, almost in the way that you would speak to an adult. It helps cognitively. Okay, very last question is, do you know multiple exam? Do you do multiple exams for GCSEs? Like you do for the 11, 13 and 16 plus? If you're talking about whether Enriched Learning does multiple mock exams, yes, nearer the time. But if your child is in year 10, exams really are not the worry. It's content at this stage. There is no point examining someone when they don't know the content and they have shown that they don't know the content. It's better to focus on the ability, on the skill, test on that skill, and then a little bit nearer the time, start looking at past papers. Okay. Are there any more questions about the 11 plus, 13 plus, 16 plus process? Okay. Well, it was an absolute pleasure to host this webinar today. I hope it was useful. The recording will stay on YouTube, so please do share with friends and family, watch it over and over again. I answer questions extensively. Please do join the community. It is worth your time, and there won't be another free webinar like this again. So if you want more information on this, you want an expert to lead you, you want that advice, join the community. I'm heading it up. You'll be able to access me all the time. I'll be more accessible there than anywhere else. And I look forward to interacting with you all again soon. Thank you so much for tuning in. Goodbye.